So today we're going to talk about hiring foreign workers. It's not something we do that often in HR, or at least I don't have that much exposure to it. So this has been an episode I've wanted to do for a while because I want to know why. I assume it's really complex, but maybe it's not. That's all coming up right now. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams. This is the HR Hub, and here we talk about anything related to HR. Please subscribe to the show or to the podcast to keep learning from my guests. So today my guest is Sergio Athanasso. I said that right?
You did.
Perfect. He's an immigration attorney and he has his own law firm in Pittsburgh. He specializes in global mobility and in helping us HR professionals hire foreign talent. Hi, Serge. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on the show. How are you?
I am good, and I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, this has been one I've wanted to do for a while. I have yet to find, a Canadian lawyer who will talk about the Canadian immigration side, but today we're going to focus on what you know, which I presume is mostly U.S. So I always dive in right away. So when HR thinks that they need to investigate hiring someone from another country, where should they start?
So typically they would start with an immigration lawyer. So in my case, if an HR professional says, hey, Sergio, I have a foreign worker that I want to hire. Usually the question is he work authorized or is she work authorized? Can I hire this individual at all? And I usually will say, well, does that person have a work permit? That's usually the first question. And then I could take a look at that and see if the person's work authorized. That would be like an EAD, like a work authorized document.
Hey, does someone just come work authorized from another country?
So some people will have it, like if they claim asylum, they can apply for a work authorization.
Okay.
Or if they marry a permanent resident or U.S. citizen, they can get work authorization or through temporary protected status. So some foreigners do have it already. They may have already applied. That's pretty rare. But let's say an HR professional wants to hire someone from outside the country, for example, or a recent graduate, maybe that's has an expiring student status. Then I would say, well, first send me their resume and their job description and let me know what country they're from, and we can do an analysis.
Talk to me about that. Can you give us an overview of the process of being able to make a commitment to a foreign worker that they can come and work for you?
Yeah, so, with immigration, nothing's guaranteed, but, part of the reason that I ask for the resume and the job description is to see what visa categories I feel that this position and this individual employee might fit in. So, it's kind of like alphabet soup. There's all different types of visa categories and they have different qualifications. So in my mind, I'm rapidly going to the analysis by checking their resume, which summarizes their whole background. It should have their education and then the position telling me what are the requirements for that role.
What are the most common, before you keep moving on, what are the most common categories under which people are bringing foreign workers to the U.S.?
I would say it's most likely the TN, which is reserved for Canadians and Mexicans. I would say the L1, which is for intra-company transfers. So companies have a presence in the U.S. and abroad. The E2 works similarly to that. And then an O1 for aliens of extraordinary abilities. And the H1B, which is the lottery visa for those with bachelor's degrees. So I'd say that those are probably the most used by corporations.
Right. Do any of those entitle you to a green card?
So some lead into them or have similar qualifications, but there's another process that you would have to start for permanent residency. It's not like you just stay for so long with these non-immigrant visa types and just get the green card.
Okay. Now, how long do people get work authorization for?
That's a good question, and it depends on the visa type. So like an H-1B has a maximum of 6 years, but you can request 3 years and an extension of 3 more. A TN, you can request 3 years at a time, but there's no max. You can do that for the rest of your life.
Oh.
So it depends. It depends. That's part of my analysis is what are the long-term goals? When is your maximum? Does the company want you long-term? So that is one of the factors I have to consider.
What does someone do? I mean, I have so many questions, apparently. I have lots of questions.
Thanks for kidding. That's what I'm here for.
What do you do when you get to the end of the period and you're not going to renew, or you can't, or you tried and you got denied?
Well, sometimes you just go home. I say that expression, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, or you don't go home. Sometimes that's it. It's the end of the road. I always say immigration isn't guaranteed. So that might sound cold, but, workers do take a risk when they come, or students when they come for school, and nobody promised, a permanent residency here. So, it's not guaranteed. However, I do strategize, and that's what attorneys should do, and at least monitor those maximum stays for those visa categories that have them, so that 2 or 3 years in advance, they can reach out to the employer and say, hey, do you want to start the green card process? Because now would be the time to do it.
Really? 2 or 3 years?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, well, it depends on the category, but it could be quicker, but that's what we're seeing. It's been really slow, unfortunately. Yeah, so, you want to keep their underlying status. That's why you plan ahead, so there's no gap, or they don't have to go abroad and maybe consular process the green card to come back, because that's not, convenient. No one wants to lose an employee.
How do you feel like the volume of your work has gone down now that people can work remotely?
I would say no, because we still want employees in our time zones. It's really hard to deal with or work with employees that are or coworkers that are in different time zones. I mean, there's a lot of, even my clients like in Australia, it seems like we're just on different ends of the clock, so that's part of it. And then, now we're having, I guess, there's that in-office presence coming back like a couple days a week or whatnot.
It is, yeah.
And a lot of people want their kids to be in school and in the U.S. or, it depends on the country, of course, but, some employees do just want to physically be here.
So my question for the audience today is, have you done any foreign recruitment? And if so, how did that go for you? What did you learn from the process? Please share with the rest of us. It's really interesting stuff. So a few questions ago, you mentioned some of the common categories for bringing foreign workers to the U.S. Can you talk about the key requirements of qualifying for those categories?
Yeah, so let me take the L1, for example, intercompany transfer. So let's say you're in HR and you are in a U.S. office, and you have a branch or an affiliate or subsidiary or whatever it may be abroad, and you want to bring over maybe a manager or a director, VP. The qualifications would be that employee has worked for the abroad entity for at least 1 full year.
Okay.
And the one's 3 years.
Okay.
I guess the government takes, the belief that, less than a year, why don't you just hire a U.S. worker? You have to train somebody.
Oh, yes, I see. Right. Okay.
You see what I mean? Like,
Yes.
what could they have? Like, why not just hire from the U.S.? They know something about your processes, your procedures, your proprietary products. There has to be a qualifying relationship. So there has to be either similar ownership there to show that the companies are related. They have to be open and doing business and active. Can't just be some dead company or some holding cell, or flow through. It has to be a real company. And, they have to be in a role that's either managerial or specialized, and coming to work in a role that's managerial or specialized. And that's pretty much it. I mean, that's the gist of the L.
Okay. What's next?
So like a TN, for example, TN, there are specific occupations that Canadians and Mexicans, it was NAFTA, now it's US MCA, I think.
Right. Whatever.
So, if those, I'll look at the resume and I'll see, if they qualified, but that's a little bit more straightforward. So the TN list says exactly what you need to qualify. So if the person has that, say it's engineering and there is an engineering role in the US and they're Canadian or Mexican, we can get them here pretty quickly.
What do you mean pretty quickly?
Well, good question. So for Canadians, they're visa exempt, at least when it comes to a TN. They don't need to actually get a visa, just like visitors. So maybe your Canadian listeners know that they don't have an actual B1 or B2 visa. They just cross and say hi and come in. So they're visa exempt for most categories. So, for a TN, they can apply right at the border with CBP. They don't have to go to the consulate for Canadians. So they can just get their package, their offer letter, their documents, and just fly on in, drive in and say, hey, Customs Border Patrol, I'm coming in to start working. It's usually an easy process, pretty quick. You might get a worker here within 2 to 4 weeks, it depends.
Do they know, in that situation, do they need you, or can they just show up with an offer letter and their resume and go?
If it's a really clear-cut case, like it's like, let's say it's a lawyer category, let's say, and they're a lawyer and they have the degree and there's the job offer letter, they can probably do it on their own with CBP. They probably could, very, very clear. But not all cases are that clear-cut. And then, we also help prepare them for questioning with CBP. Like there's things that could just totally cut the case. Like, for example, TN visa is not a dual intent, so you shouldn't have immigrant intent. You shouldn't have the intent to remain. So maybe the worker comes in and Customs Border Patrol says, hi, do you ever want to get a green card one day? And maybe that's a thought in the back of their head. But if they're like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. Then I think
it's great. The weather in San Diego is awesome.
Yeah, I just love LA. It's just so nice. So, I would say always have a lawyer, but the easy ones, yes, probably. Yeah, now Mexicans don't have it so easy, unfortunately, because they have to go to the consulate to get the visa. So there's a visa process. They have to apply and pay fees and have the interview there. They can't just come in with CBP. And then once they get the visa, they still have to enter with CBP. So there can be another line of questioning.
Are there any other categories you should talk about? I'll try not to ask so many questions.
That's okay. This is really complicated stuff. It's a lot. I would just say the O1 is good for extraordinary abilities. So what's good about that is there's no lottery. There's no cap. You can premium process that or expedite that with the government. So as long as you can demonstrate that employee or candidate has extraordinary abilities and whatever it is that you need, could be like accounting, it could be engineering, it could be whatever it may be, then we can apply at any time of the year. So that's also great. And it doesn't matter what their nationality is. So that's also very helpful. So it's another option. And I'd say the H-1B is another big one. The only issue with the H-1B is that it is a lottery and it opens every year. So unless the employer is exempt from that, maybe it's a nonprofit or falls under one of the other exemptions, most private employers will have to apply. So, if there's a company that's seeking foreign workers or maybe recruiting, they put them in the lottery, the odds are maybe 30%. So, that's a little bit unfortunate. And the start date is the fiscal year. So it would be 10/1, October 1st. That's our fiscal year here in the US. So it's not as quick. It's a lottery. It's not, and nothing's guaranteed, but there's less of a guarantee. So it can be frustrating. So it's another thing that we planned for.
If you're going to get into the lottery, is there a day you have to apply and then they spin the thing and spit out? I know they don't do that, but that's what I'm picturing. Or does this lottery just sort of happen throughout the year?
No, it's usually the first 2 or 3 weeks of March, and then you apply. And if you're selected, you find out usually by April 1st, and then you must submit your petition. If you're selected, you still have to apply and be approved, and that has to happen so you have to submit the petition by the end of June, and your start date would be October 1st. So if you're here, you change your status.
Long process.
It is. And, I typically like to get students. So students, when they graduate, they get a year to work in their field. So
Okay.
foreign students. So that's called OPT, occupational practice training. And if they're in a STEM field, science, technology, engineering, or math, they get 2 extra years. So I like to use those 3 years to apply for the lottery every year. Because, if you apply every year for 3 years, then your odds are better.
Yeah. Your chances, if it is 30%, you just do the stats there. And
Right.
can you talk a little bit about the advantages of hiring foreign workers from your experience?
I would say the advantages are, um, some cultures, they would have a little bit more of I don't know what the right word is, but maybe you have an output input job and you just need somebody loyal and you need a worker that maybe isn't so confrontational or works well with others. And maybe you can find that in foreign workers. Also, because their immigration status is dependent on their work and employment, you get a loyal worker, whether they like it or not, for the most part. Because porting or changing employers isn't necessarily easy. You have to have a job offer and then they have to apply for you, or you have to make travel, re-enter. So it's not a cakewalk.
Does that create the power dynamic, though, where the employer has quite a bit more power over that individual than they would with an American? Does that create abuse?
I don't think so, because you still have all the HR protections and, the human rights protections or whatever the worker protections are in the United States. It's not like they don't apply. So, they still couldn't be treated poorly. They'd have to be paid, adequately, and depending on the visa type, it would be sometimes at the prevailing wage for that area. So I don't think so, but if somebody's unhappy, a foreign worker's unhappy, they couldn't leave as easily. They
Yeah.
just get up and walk away. So
Right.
I have a lot of employees and, potential clients call me and just say, like, I haven't talked to my employer, but I want to leave, and I want to know, like, what are my options? Can I, and what I have to do? And if I quit tomorrow, like, I'm at my wit's end, what happens? And I'll be like, well, you'll be out of status and you'll be within your grace period. And after that, they could remove you, So, like, I have to have those conversations.
What might surprise people about the process, and I suppose surprise HR people about applying for any one of these visas on behalf of a worker you want to bring to the country?
Kind of like how you feel. It's interesting and it seems a little complicated, but, once you get it down to a rhythm, working with an attorney or whatever it
Yeah.
may be,
Yeah.
I think it becomes streamlined and a bit easier. And then you realize that this isn't so bad. And you're, maybe your company is benefiting from this process in many ways. And, sometimes companies ask about the costs, but, I'm like, you can work this in as almost like a bonus, like maybe you give bonuses, but maybe you help with the immigration. I mean, it's not that costly, you get hopefully a good worker. That's so I think it's just a learning curve. I hope that more HR professionals learn about this, because especially now where it's hard to find talent, it's like you have the whole world. The world is your oyster, so to speak.
What are some challenges maybe you haven't mentioned yet about around hiring foreign workers?
I would say the challenges are timing. I would say it might be difficult. I mean, most people or companies, they just want someone to start tomorrow.
Yes.
So it's always like, when can you start? So that's always a question. So I'd say it can be a slow process at times, and a lengthy process, especially getting to the green card stage. So that's part of it. And, it could be a document intensive application, but over time, once we get that company's documents and corporate docs, it's just, like I said, it becomes streamlined. So then you're really just talking about the employee and throwing in the documents that you have. So it's kind of hard to say. It's so specific to the person and the company and the role.
Okay. What haven't we talked about now that we should have talked about?
Hmm. Well, the agencies are split. So that's something maybe to note that USCIS is our internal agency. Customs and Border Patrol is the Border Patrol, it's its own agency. And then the Department of State, where the consular applications or interviews may take place, is another agency. So they don't all align or agree with each other, and they can put their foot down and kind of mess things up, So that can complicate things as well. That's one thing that I thought was pretty interesting when I got into this. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, this person's approved by USAS and CBP didn't allow them to enter, But it makes sense because if they have a suspicion or they think you're not committing to state, they're the police force, And
any one of those three could independently deny the application?
in theory, yes.
Okay.
Typically, they're all on board, but yes.
Like if they show up at the border and unbeknownst to you, they have a criminal record or something, then
Right.
CBP would, is it CBP?
The Customs and Border Patrol, yeah. I think it's the same for Canada.
It is, which is why I'm like, did I say that right? It is the same. Yes. Interesting. Okay. So if an American recruiter wants to learn more about bringing foreign talent to the U.S., what would you suggest?
I would say, maybe start with just a Google search, maybe, if they wanted, just for something fast, especially with AI now. I don't know, maybe ask ChatGPT, just say, I have a worker that I want to bring. Maybe they can help, but that's not where I would say stop. But I would definitely confirm any of your suspicions or questions with an immigration attorney. And I'd say one that specializes in corporate, because it is a niche. There's immigration attorneys, like I said, to protected status and asylum and all kinds of important things. But to get into corporate is a niche, and then, sometimes attorneys won't touch TNs or, Ls or Es or the, so it's hard to find an attorney that knows the whole gambit of them. So you want to make sure that you've got somebody that specializes or understands your case type too.
Hey, interesting, because of course there would be lots of aspects of how you could practice immigration law.
Yeah.
Right. Like, bringing in family members or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. Or, some just get their niche. Like they do MMA fighters. I know someone does just like all the MMA fighters. I'm like, how freaking cool, like from Brazil and like God knows. So, and that's just like their business model, It doesn't mean that another attorney can't do it, but there are some that are just like, that's my thing. That's what I like to do.
MMA fighters, I guess they need visas too.
They do. It all depends how long you're staying, and
okay, right.
They're gonna be compensated, and is it just one thing, and are they gonna get a reward? So, it's just there's a lot to the analysis. But once your business, your business model. Let's say you do your finance company or something like that, then you kind of know. Eventually, after a couple cases, you'll know what your options might be. If you don't have a branch office abroad, then you're not doing an intercompany transfer. If you're not dealing with a Canadian or Mexican, you're not doing a TN. So your options, it could be a pretty quick elimination process.
Okay. All right. Let's leave it there. Well, thanks, Serge. That was just so fascinating. All the alphabet soup and the categories that each applies to. It's really interesting. I did an episode on working in Canada, well, or maybe it might apply to US as well, but working in HR and coming as an immigrant. And a link to that episode's right here. Thanks for watching out there. We'll see you next time.